We're back. We're back with a classic.
We're back with the classic.
Back to the Pu Song Ling. Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio. Story 4. Spitting Water. Song Wan of Liang was appointed secretary to one of the boards and rented a very dilapidated house in the capital. One night, his mother, who was sleeping in the main hall, waited on by two maidservants, heard a strange sound coming from her courtyard outside, like the sound made by a tailor spitting on his cloth. She told her maids to poke a hole in the paper lattice and see what they could see. They beheld an old lady, short and hunchbacked, her white hair done up in a 2-inch topknot, prancing around the courtyard like a crane. And as she pranced, an endless stream of water came spurting from her mouth. The maids, frightened by this strange sight, reported back at once to their lady, who was horrified. They helped her up to the window to see for herself, and at that very moment the old prancing crone came closer and spat a mouthful of water straight at them, splitting the paper and causing all three women to fall flat on the ground. It was the middle of the night, and not a soul in the family was aware of what was happening. At sunrise the following morning, the household servants gathered outside as usual and knocked on the door. Receiving no reply, they grew alarmed, broke open the door, and forced their way in to find the lady and her two maids lying side by side on the floor, apparently dead. Upon closer inspection, one of the maids still had a slight trace of warmth in her chest. They sat her up, gave her water to drink, and in a little while she came round and was able to tell them everything she had witnessed. When Mr. Song arrived on the scene, he was devastated with grief and remorse. The spot where the strange old lady had been seen before she vanished was examined minutely. Excavating to a depth of 3 feet, they uncovered white hair. Digging still deeper, they found the remains of an entire corpse. An old woman, exactly like the one the maid had described, her face still covered with flesh, as if she were still alive. Mr. Song ordered them to strike it. And when they did so, the flesh and bones simply fell away. Beneath the skin, the corpse was all rotten. It consisted of nothing but water. And then there's pictures. There's really good pictures. The picture says, the old crone spat a mouthful of water straight at them. I think we have a little time for one more short one. So let's go to Story 7, The Troll. Sun Taibo told me this story. His great-grandfather, also named Sun, had been studying at Willow Gully Temple on South Mountain and came home for the autumn wheat harvest. He only stayed at home for 10 days, but when he returned to the temple and opened the door of his lodgings, he saw that the table was thick with dust and the windows laced with cobwebs. He ordered his servant to clean the place, and by evening it was in sufficiently good order for him to be able to install himself comfortably again. He dusted off the bed, spread out his quilt, closed the door, and lay his head down on the pillow. Moonlight came flooding in at the window. He tossed and turned a long while as silence descended on the temple. Then suddenly a wind got up, and he heard the main temple door flapping noisily. Thinking to himself that one of the monks must have forgotten to close it, he lay there a while in some anxiety. The wind seemed to be coming closer and closer in the direction of his quarters, and the next thing he knew, the door leading into his room blew open. He was now seriously alarmed. And quite unable to compose himself. His room filled with the roaring of the wind, and he heard the sound of clomping boots gradually approaching the alcove in which his bed was situated. By now he was utterly terrified. Then the door of the alcove itself flew open, and there it was, a great troll. Stooping down at first as it approached, then suddenly looming up over his bed, its head grazing the ceiling. That's how tall he was. Its face dark and blotchy like an old melon rind. Its blazing eyes scanned the room, and its cavernous mouth lolled open, revealing great shining fangs more than 3 inches long. Its tongue flickered from side to side, and from its throat there issued a terrible rasping sound that reverberated through the room. Sun quaked in sheer terror, thinking quickly to himself that the beast was already too close for him to have any chance of escape, and that his only hope now lay in trying to kill it. He secretly drew his dagger from beneath his pillow, concealed it in his sleeve, then swiftly drew it out and stabbed the creature in the belly. The blade made a dull thud on impact, as if it had struck a stone mortar. The enraged troll flailed out at him with its huge claws, but Sun shrank back from it. The troll only succeeded in tearing at the bed cover and pulled it down onto the ground as it stormed out. Sun had been dragged to the ground with the bed cover, and he lay there howling. His servant came running with a lantern, and finding the door locked, as it usually was during the night, he broke open the window and climbed in. Appalled at the state his master was in, he helped him back to bed and heard his tale. Afterwards they examined the room together and saw that the bed cover was still caught tight between the door and the door frame. As soon as they opened the door and the cover fell free, they saw great holes in the fabric, where the beast's claws had torn at it. When dawn broke the next morning, they dared not stay there a moment longer, but packed their things and returned home. On a subsequent occasion, they questioned the resident monks, but there had been no further apparition.
Again. Book again.
I'll read more.